Hi everyone, this is Elena of the Witches Box, and I'm here today with another episode of Witch Booktube. And this book, it's called A Witch's Book of Silence. Here's all the stains on the book cover, which are completely my fault because I'm always putting lotion and oils on my hands, so everything I touch is always a little oily. But I am not quite sure where I got this book. It's by Karina Blackheart. I got it because of the topic, or the title actually, and I was really interested. So let me read to you about Karina. I'm not quite sure if this is the only book that she's written. This is self-published. Karina Blackheart is a witch, fairy initiate, ecstatic, craft teacher, and perpetual seeker. She is the founder of the Blackheart lineage of the Anderson fairy tradition. She currently teaches via craftingthewitch.com as well as several non-craft venues. She no longer accepts students for training in fairy tradition. She offers personal mentorship, spiritual midwifery, and soul support, as well as spiritual retreats, leadership training, seminars, firewalking, and certified firewalk instructor training. You can learn about silent retreats and other offerings by liking her Facebook pages that are called Crafting the Witch and Heart and Soul. You can find her expertly led guided meditations, including the practices from this book, Trance Journey Meditations, and digital training programs at craftingthewitch.com and on amazon.com. A lot of words, but there it is. This is a small book. It's a fairly easy read. I'm going to give you the slight critique right off the bat, and then I'm going to get into why I really like this book. So there's a little bit of everything here. The book is self-published. This is interesting. It was an interesting process for me because I'm always in this kind of personal back and forth around, does it make most sense to self-publish or publish traditionally, especially if you have some business savvy. Sometimes producing your own book and publishing your own book makes sense because you have the network, you have the systems in place, you have the marketing team in place to do the thing. Anyway, it's a conversation that I'm constantly having with myself. As you know, I love writers, I love publishing, I love books, I'm writing a book. So all of those things are always up for me. This book to me was a reminder, and this is where the critique comes in, that good editing is such an important and critical part of a book. Editing can be so many things. It can be spelling, it can be grammar, it can be like that technical in terms of the editing, but it's also editing for content. And this book starts out with an assumption that doesn't get fleshed out, to my opinion, to my mind, as fully as it probably should have, in order to give proper context for the rest of the book. And I feel like had this been edited, there would have been more information about this. So I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to talk about what this is. In the concept section of the book, which is at the very beginning, it's past the introduction, this is the first sentence. It says, "Certainly, we have all heard of the witch's pyramid." It's like, no. I know many people who have no idea what the witch's pyramid is. It would have been great to go into depth as to where this came from. She does identify what the witch's pyramid is briefly, but it would have been great to have some context. Where did this come from? What is this about? Who created this? Is it a Wiccan thing? Is it a tradition thing? Is it a fairy tradition thing? There's no information along those lines about that. That is really the only critique of this book, because it's like I read this first chapter and I thought, this could have been fleshed out in a way that would have brought in people who didn't have the context that you're assuming that they have. That's it. Let me tell you what the witch's pyramid is if you don't know what it is. The witch's pyramid is a philosophy, an idea that a witch's power is derived from these 4 tenets, 4 core beliefs, 4 core characteristics. And it is the ability to know, the ability to will, the ability to dare, and the ability to keep silent. And she says, these 4 actions form the foundation, corners, frames, and walls of the pyramid, which is a sacred geometric form, a structure, and a container. She does talk about what those things mean, and that's it. And then she moves on, which is all well and beautiful and good, but I really would have wanted a little bit more context. What I'm going to do is at the description section below, I'm going to give you 1, maybe 2 links to a couple of articles that kind of expound on where this came from, what this concept's really about, and how it's used now, so that you can kind of educate yourself on that if you've not heard of the witch's pyramid before. So really quickly, I just want to give a summary. The witch's power to know is really about learning and knowing your craft. Know what you're doing, know why you're doing it, know who you are. It's the power to know. The power to dare, which is a fearless search for wisdom, for truth, for power, for ways to do things in a way that isn't afraid of what it might reveal and what it might create for you. The power to will is then to take that information and actually manifest, wield your power, wield your knowledge, wield your capacity in your craft for creating the life that you want or creating the world that you want for yourself, and then the power to keep silent, and which is what this book is about. I've talked a little bit about silence in different ways. I think that this is something that today, particularly in our cultural context that we're living in now, particularly with social media, we really compromise our capacity for silence and the power that is held in silence every single day. So this is why I know that I got this book because of the title, because it's something that we're not talking about enough. And I was curious about what it is that she had to say or what was written about it in this book. So that's the only critique. I really would have wanted a little bit more about that, but it's not a big deal in the sense that the information is out there so that you can educate yourself pretty quickly about what this is and where it came from. Again, I'll link a couple of articles and things down below so that you can check that out. The other quick critique that I have about this book is that there's no table of contents. And you know, Mama needs some structure in her life. I need a table of contents. I need an index. Come on. I got another book the other day. I'm not going to stop ranting about this, you guys. I'm so sorry, but this is who you're on the train with. There was another book that I picked up and I was reading. I'm trying to look for it on my desk. I don't even remember which one it was. Again, there was no index. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, people. Why isn't there an index? I'm trying to find the passage that talked about the thing, and now I can't find it because the table of contents isn't designed to be this detailed, but an index is. Have an index. For the love of everything, please. Indexes, people. Indexes. So there's no table of contents here. Another little critique. It's important to do because it gives people a way to navigate the book. I'm going to read a couple of quotes from the book to kind of give you some idea about what she's covering. There's a cycle to our activity as witches. In silence, we gather knowledge, develop the will. When these are in alignment, we embody passionate daring so as to speak and act from a place of unerring truth. Having dared to act and speak with integrity and honor, we release our active magic upon the world. We let go, we surrender, returning once more to silence, where we wait, observe, and gather information. We pay attention and take note of how our act of daring and magic is manifesting. How is the outcome aligning with our vision and will? Silence, to me, is taking a pretty big hit in society lately. There's some confusion about the act of silence as a choice of will and maturity, as opposed to, and this is where the confusion is, as opposed to silence because you've been shamed into silence. And as a reaction to so many of us being shamed into silence because of familial dysfunction, because of societal dysfunction, there's an active reaction to just spew it all out as a way to rebel against the oppression. But it also then creates a devastating disempowerment, and we're not paying attention to this. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. She doesn't speak about this in these terms, but you know that I always expound on everything I read and give you my opinion because that's how I roll. As an act of power, as an act of personal and magical maturity, silence is so important. We've talked about this in so many different ways. And she does here as well in terms of things like you're casting a spell. You're working on something right now. You're working on gathering the energy, gathering the resources, gathering your ritual spell architecture so that you can put it together in a way that you're going to execute at some point to manifest in the world. When you're doing that, don't speak about it, because to speak about it, especially in random spaces, is to leak out power that you are supposed to be holding in containers so that it builds up and builds up and builds up in its potency. Silence can be an incredible act of self-protection, of power and energetic protection. It is also a characteristic of self-mastery. Why are you telling people what you're telling people? What is the purpose of that? Are you just dispelling information and energy because you're nervous and you're in reaction and you're nervously spilling everywhere? Are you sharing things because you want to in some way amp up your own internal insecurity? Or are you speaking because you know that the words that you're going to put out into the world are going to land on the most fertile ground and create the most potent and important and effective impact? how we use our words and how we treat our words, it's an incredible indicator of the value that we place on the wisdom that we hold and the information that we hold. Are you dispersing it carelessly to people who are not really going to pay attention or use that information in a really disrespectful and harmful way? Or are you holding your words back until you know the ground is fertile enough to hold the gold of what you have to say? Like, for real, these are questions to ask yourself. This also has a lot to do with the way you cast your spell. As I said already before, that if you're in the middle of a working and you start talking about it to someone who is not involved in the actual working that you're doing, why are you doing that? You're dispelling the potency and the power. So she goes into all sorts of different examples about the importance of holding silence, the difference between secrets that are compelled, as I mentioned before, if it's like keeping a family secret, keeping something shameful occluded because it perpetuates the shame, as opposed to secrecy as a way to conceal that which not everyone is meant to see or hear or know. She talks about that, which I thought was really important. I want to read to you a paragraph that she has here in regards to silence and power. Silence builds power. Silence allows for integration. Silence creates containment. Silence generates spaciousness. That's so important. Silence is sometimes kinder than speech. Silence is honest. Silence may be wielded as a weapon. Silence can be utilized as a tool of defense or discernment. Silence is a shield. Silence can rebuke. It can be a comfort and a balm. Silence teaches us to know ourselves and keep our own counsel. Deep listening requires silence. When we pause to think before speaking, we hold silence. In silence, we drop beneath thought, worry, desire, and approval sinking into the ground of being. In silence, we learn to hear the myriad of voices of nature, plant, animal, mineral, land, and cityscape, river and sea, heavenly body, and the infinite expanses of space. Through silence, we become capable of communing with the unseen realms and their inhabitants. In silence, we learn to read signs, omens, and sigils, divining all manner of objects, events, and patterns. Silence invokes emptiness as the liminal space of tomb, void, and womb. Silence is the space of rest between breaths, heartbeats, notes, seasons, lifetimes, and all cycles of nature. It is the still point between thought and action. Silence is the holy moment that follows the making of sincere prayer, the sending of the cone of power, the pleasure of orgasm. In silence does the rain of blessing fall from the Aumakaua upon the Wayne and the Unipihili. In silence are our prayers made received and made manifest. Really beautifully written. I really appreciated the way she formatted the book after the beginning, because she talks at length about the differences in one silence as opposed to the other, and then later the second half of the book is the practices of silence, with quite a few practices that really bring up what I would imagine would be opportunities for personal assessment in terms of your relationship with silence. This is an important topic in witchcraft. This is an important skill to cultivate for yourself in witchcraft. And there is certainly so much more that could have been written about this, but as a book that can bring up a new topic to really measure yourself with and to explore, I think it's a great little book to grab. It's called The Witch's Book of Silence by Karina Blackheart. And I think that what I want to say, just to further this a little bit, because you know me, have things to say. And I just had an incident today that kind of brought up the need for silence in a lot of ways. Silence, to me, is about self-mastery as a witch. Silence is a powerful tool to wield that is a reflection of what value you place on what you know and what you don't know. We need more silence in the world. We dispel so much of our power and our energy with randomly, constantly diarrhea of the mouth, vomiting stuff out in social media 24/7. Do I really need to know that you just made 3 appointments with 3 different doctors? Why are you sharing that? Understand that I'm not saying that you shouldn't share on social media, but why are you sharing what you're sharing? And are you just casting this personal information out to the masses who you don't even fully know? Maybe most of us have quite a few people on our Facebook friend list and our Instagram friend list and and all the things. And you're just giving out constantly on the daily personal information that isn't necessarily edifying, educational, or uplifting. It's just random details. You're constantly casting things out, constantly leaking energy. Really start to consider what the ramifications are of that, but also why. When we share out of a nervous need to constantly be seen, we are in reaction and we're leaking power. We're not in response to something that requires our presence or requires our honesty or requires our wisdom in our sharing. We're just randomly in reaction all the time, just spewing out all the stuff so that people don't forget that I'm here, so that people think I'm cooler than I really am, so that blah, 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 blah. Because I'm really nervous and I don't know how to be still and in silence and with myself. These are important questions to ask. I think this book begins to open the door to those questions. It doesn't do a comprehensive job. I don't know that that was necessarily her intention, but your capacity for silence and for managing what you share and what you don't share is an important quality to cultivate in yourself. It is an important tool in the power of your magic. It is an important tool in your own spiritual maturity. It is absolutely an important tool in your protection work. There are so many different ways that holding silence and understanding silence can really benefit your potency as a person and in your life. So I love that she wrote about this. I'm not sure if she's written other things. It's definitely maybe the scratch of the surface into a really important topic. I will definitely link below to a couple of things that talk about articles or blog posts that talk about the Witch's Pyramid if you want to dive deeper into that and learn a little bit about where that came from and what that is and how that applies to your work and to your magic and to your spiritual life for sure. Those will be down below, as well as a link to the book. Other than that, that's it. If you've read this book, if you have thoughts on silence, I'd love to hear about it down below. And I will see you next week. Take care. Bye.